Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. This is the Excerpt. Today, the U.S. has launched another strike on Houthi militants in Yemen. Plus, we have the latest on lawmakers' race to beat the clock to avoid a government shutdown, and a new proposal could expand the child tax credit. The U.S. military launched its third strike yesterday against Houthi militants in Yemen. They destroyed 4 anti-ship ballistic missiles prepared to launch at ships in the Red Sea, according to U.S. Central Command. The U.S., along with Britain, have attacked dozens of missile and radar sites used by Iranian-backed Houthi militants in Yemen since Thursday. Yesterday's strikes followed the second successful Houthi attack on commercial shipping in 2 days. A Houthi anti-ship missile yesterday struck a Maltese-flagged bulk carrier, though no injuries were reported. The UN is calling on Houthis to implement a Security Council resolution from last week demanding an immediate stop to its attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, Israel continues its strikes on Gaza, and Qatar and France said yesterday they have mediated a deal between Israel and Hamas to allow the delivery of medications to some of the Israeli hostages held captive in Gaza. Congress is running out of time to avoid a government shutdown, with a crucial deadline coming up on Friday. But lawmakers are set to vote in the coming days on a bipartisan deal to temporarily avoid a shutdown. I caught up with USA Today Congress, Campaigns, and Democracy Reporter Ken Tran for more. Ken, thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
So, Ken, Congress is set to vote on a deal to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. What's the latest here?
Sure. So this is the third short-term stopgap measure Congress will pass to kick the can down the road and fund the government, temporarily at least, while they figure out a longer-term solution. This measure is referred to as a continuing resolution, and it maintains House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's a Republican from Louisiana, his two-phased approach that funds parts of the government up until one date and the other remaining parts until another date. This continuing resolution would fund the government for the next month and a half or so until March 1st, with parts up until then, and the remaining until March 8th.
How disruptive could the House's right flank be to getting this passed?
So we saw the House's right flank be very disruptive last week when Johnson announced a handshake agreement with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. This handshake agreement was setting the spending levels, referred to as a top-line agreement, just so lawmakers that set these spending levels can know how much they can fund the government with. Last week, we saw those conservatives really try to heavily pressure Johnson into backing out of the deal because they thought that that deal should have had more spending cuts that they've long wanted. But ultimately, Johnson didn't back out of the deal, and we're here with another continuing resolution to buy lawmakers more time to abide by that agreement.
Yeah, and Ken, in terms of just how close we are to actually seeing a government shutdown, can you remind us about some of the key deadlines and also the programs that might be affected?
So under the second continuing resolution that passed in November, the first deadline is January 19th. So the government funding that will expire then will be any government functions related to agriculture, military construction and veterans affairs, transportation, housing and urban development, and energy and water. The remaining spending expires on February 2nd.
So, Ken, if and when this short-term stopgap bill is passed, what's next for lawmakers after that? Might we finally see a more long-term solution?
Well, that was the hope for lawmakers from the last two continuing resolutions, but we know that speed isn't exactly Congress's forte. It is possible that some weeks that Congress originally wasn't scheduled to be in session, Congress will call lawmakers back to vote to expedite the process. We'll have to see if they can meet the deadline by March 1st and March 8th.
Ken Tran, great insight as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
It's safe to say that 2024 election season is here, and while Donald Trump has been considered the Republican frontrunner for some time, his win in Iowa this week solidifies that. His unprecedented 51% finish crushed his nearest challengers Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley by 30 points or more. DeSantis will have been pleased to beat out Haley for second in Iowa, but he poured a lot of attention on the state, visiting all 99 counties, and his failure to finish a more decisive second has raised questions about how long he can raise money and attract support. Haley was likely disappointed to finish third in Iowa after a strong wave of polling ahead of caucus night. Still, Iowa has a bad record of signaling the eventual Republican presidential nominee. In the last 7 contested caucuses, 5 of the winners failed to win the nomination. But since the beginning of presidential primaries in modern times, no candidate in either party who has carried both Iowa and New Hampshire has been denied their party's nomination. Meanwhile, ABC News has canceled the next Republican presidential debate after Nikki Haley said she would not participate unless Donald Trump did so. He skipped out the Republican debate so far. The Republican primary will be held in New Hampshire on January 23rd, this coming Tuesday. A proposal was announced yesterday to expand the child tax credit and extend business tax deductions. I spoke with USA Today money and personal finance reporter Medora Lee to learn more. Medora, thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
So a bipartisan proposal was announced yesterday to expand the child tax credit and also to extend business tax deductions. Medora, what exactly is in this proposal? Let's start with the child tax credit.
The plan includes a phased increase to the refundable portion of it for this year through 2025. And then it's also going to adjust the tax credit for inflation starting in 2024.
Yeah, what do advocates say about this plan?
Advocates have really wanted to expand the child tax credit because we saw an expansion of it during COVID. And they say that this lifted millions of children out of poverty. So this doesn't quite go as far as the COVID expansion, but it's kind of part way. So there would still be work requirements. Low-income families would be able to get up to $1,800 refunded of the $2,000 child tax credit instead of the current $1,600. And that amount would rise to $1,900 in 2024 and $2,000 in 2025.
You know, the proposal, as I mentioned, also touched on business tax deductions. Medora, what did this part focus on specifically?
So this was something that a lot of businesses fought for. They had to start deducting the cost of their U.S.-based research and development investments over 5 years. And this would kind of bring it back to allow them to immediately take the deduction instead of doing it over 5 years. And it would also allow immediate deductions for a lot of capital expenses and allow for more interest deductions. And Republicans feel like this is going to help spur businesses and research.
And Medora, what other tax provisions are in this proposal?
So some other ones include expanding the low-income housing tax credit and extending tax breaks to people who are victims of natural disasters. And also, this one's kind of an important one, accelerating the deadline for filing backdated claims for the employee retention credit to January 31st instead of, I think the original date was April 2025, because that ERC has been riddled with lots of fraud. And I think the IRS even had to stop taking claims on it for a while. So they're hoping to get this off of their plates and prevent fraud.
So this has some bipartisan support. Medora, what chance does this have at passing in Congress? What's next for moving it forward?
It does have bipartisan support, but it's going to be tough. They want to, I think Senator Wyden, Ron Wyden of Oregon, said that he wanted to try to push this through so that people could start taking these, get like the child tax credit for 2023. But tax season starts January 29th, and so that gives them, 13 days? I mean, it's not unheard of that they pass something after tax season starts and then it goes retroactively, but that would cause a ton of headaches for the IRS and could delay refunds and a whole host of other problems. So we'll see. The chances might be kind of low, because we have to keep the government running. We're in danger of another shutdown. So that might take some priority.
Yeah, well, the clock is ticking, as it so often is. Medora Lee covers money and personal finance for USA Today. Thanks as always, Medora.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All hail Chicago's Rat Hole. Everyone knows about the Windy City's deep dish pizza, the Bean Monument, and Willis Tower, but tourists have been flocking to a new landmark. The Rat Hole is a splat mark on a sidewalk shaped like a rat that fell from the sky. The hole and its surrounding area are now full of people's offerings, including flowers, cheese, shots of alcohol, and even money for the rodent-shaped hole. And the hole in the sidewalk has become so popular that the Lakeview Roscoe Village Chamber of Commerce created a contest asking residents to name it. They're accepting submissions through tomorrow. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, back tomorrow with more of the Excerpt from USA Today.